Hello, everybody. It is Tanya Williams here, author of A Child-Free Happily Ever After and founder of Childfree Magazine. Now, I have a really important topic that I'm going to be talking to Ali about today. So if you have read Childfree Magazine, hopefully you have read Ali's story. And the title of the story was to take the pressure down. And it was all about the pressure that she suffered from her mother-in-law to have children. And I think this is a really important topic because it's something that so many child-free men and women go through. And, and it's a great story. We've had, amazing feedback on it. So I wanted to bring Ali on and sort of dive deeper into the topic because I know it's one that, is so relatable to so many people. So thank you, Ali, for writing a fantastic article, and thank you for taking the time to have a chat. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell people a little bit more about your story and your situation?
Hi, Tanya. Thank you very much for inviting me on. So I'm Ali, and it was an absolute pleasure to write the article for you. It's something that's been very close to my heart, really, because without that story, being child-free was never an issue for me. I didn't recognize it was stigmatized. I just thought I'm never having children. And my experiences with that now ex-mother-in-law really floored me, I suppose, and it gave me such a great awareness as to the stigmatized view that people have about child-free women, from my experience, but people in general. So it spun my life around, and this is now looking at almost maybe 8 years ago.
Wow. So I mean, it's interesting when you put a timeline on it to think that it was so long ago, but it still has an impact on your life in terms of when, I suppose, when you think of those, when you have those memories and you think about what happened, the fact that it can still be so upsetting this far on goes to show how intense it would have been actually going through that.
Yeah, it was really tense, to be honest with you. And I think it was I hope I portrayed in the article, it was the feeling of just being harassed. And it just had me questioning myself. It had me questioning my identity. It made me think, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? Because before that, I accepted it was never an issue. I just thought kids aren't for me. It was never an issue. I never had it on my radar to even seek other people in my position. I was neither up nor down with it. But for it to become such an between this woman and myself, and had on me, and that's why it's lasting in my life to now, because I want to help other people who have maybe been put under similar pressure, and I suppose really highlight that you have a choice, that the choice is for you, and that no matter what anyone else says to you, don't buckle under the pressure. If it's not for you, then stay true to yourself, because ultimately you're the one that's going to have to go through absolutely everything, from the pregnancy, the childbirth, the raising it, the cleaning up after. I say it, I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, the baby, the child. And some people are fantastic parents. Maybe I would be a good parent, but I don't want to be. And that's the key thing.
Yeah.
So
can you share with people, so for people who haven't read the article now, obviously, we're talking about the fact that you had a lot of pressure from your mother-in-law. Can you share a little bit about what that scenario was for you and what your story is around that? So obviously you're with a partner and your mother-in-law was pressuring you. Can you tell people a bit about what that was, what she was doing? And I know you said it was constant, but like, what was the experience? Tell us a bit more about that for the people who haven't read it.
Yeah. Then partner to her son for maybe in total, I can't remember when she first started mentioning it. So she much as, oh, I can't wait until you have a baby, or I can't wait until I get to push my grandchild in the pram. And so I said to her, that's not on our cards. I'd had conversations with my then partner. It was very open. It wasn't something put on him. I made it very clear to him that that wasn't something I wanted. And if he did want that, then of course we would go our separate ways if it was important to him. Time I saw her, which might have been every few months, there would be a comment. She would ignore my, at the time I was maybe trying to be quite nice about it and just say, oh, it's not going to happen. And I wouldn't kind of be assertive or how I classed as mean, perhaps. But she just kept going, and it got worse and worse. And from some things bordering on the ridiculous, like I think I said in the article that she told me she'd bought a training toilet seat, and it was in the attic for when she had a grandchild, and there were some just really ridiculous things, and it just really weighed on me, and she became quite manipulative with it. I don't want to get I want to remain respectful to her, but she become quite manipulative with it. It created a divide. It created a huge divide with my then partner and I, because when I look back, I recognize how he lacked the courage he thought it was an issue between me and his mum when it wasn't. He really should have been on my side. I would suggest he maybe thought I would change my mind, and just was like, there, yes, that's okay, darling, don't you worry. And maybe secretly hoped I would change my mind, or he just didn't want to know.
So do you think,
and I suppose,
he actually wanted children and just was like, exactly that, she'll change your mind? So rather than having that, because you would think that if he didn't want to have children, he would have had that conversation with his mother and said, Mum, we both don't want children. You're not going to get children from me as well. But it doesn't sound like that was the case. Otherwise, you would have thought that he would have spoken up to her and said, no, like it's not going to happen. So perhaps he was secretly going, oh, well, actually I probably do, and she might change her mind. Like, it seems like that could be the case.
Yeah, we're cutting off a little, but I think I got that. I didn't feel we were front. Yeah, I didn't feel we were a united front, and I didn't feel he had my back. And especially in hindsight, isn't it great when you can look back on things and eras with the beauty of hindsight? Yeah. And I suppose I didn't recognize just how damaging his lack of support was and how toxic it actually was. So
yeah. And look, I mean, and that's a hard one if you don't see her that often, like you're saying, it was sort of every few months, but it was that constant thing, and she's not actually getting to see your day-to-day life, so she couldn't see what your lifestyle was about and stuff as well. But I mean, that shouldn't make a difference anyway. But do you think perhaps that, and I'm not defending her in any way, shape or form, because what she did is horrible, do you think she was feeling pressure to conform amongst her friend group? Because apparently maybe all her friends had grandchildren, so she was feeling like she was missing out. Do you know much about her relationships with her friends? Because often we find with grandchildlessness, they go, oh, but all my friends have got grandkids, so I want grandkids. Do you think that was the case with her?
Yeah. I don't think it was with her, simply because I don't really think she had a social circle. Where I am very sympathetic with her, though, is that she did want more than one child, and she could only have one child. Now, I never had that discussion with. My understanding is that she could not conceive another child. I don't know if she ever considered other options. So I did sympathize with her. But then I suppose she then put all her desires and urges to have a second child onto me. And that in a way is why I received so much pressure, because she only had one child. And so, I was her only hope of grandchildren. And she came out with just the most ridiculous reasons for me to have children, and or incentives almost, which made it very difficult, because I wanted to be respectful and kind to her. I was very aware of her not upset, but sensitivities and the trauma maybe that she couldn't have another child. But but I also had to be true to myself. And I think it's very, very dangerous to have a child to keep someone else happy.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it was, yeah, so it left me very, I'm quite an empathetic person, and I don't like to see other people upset. So I was very upset and very sensitive to not pleasing her, as it were. I think back then in particular, I was quite a people pleaser. But I don't think, I think people pleasing, having a child to people please is pretty extreme.
Oh, it's
So
crazy. It's crazy. And we'll go there. We'll go there in a minute. But I just want to ask, with your partner, like, how long had you guys been together for? And were you, just boyfriend, girlfriend? Were you engaged? Like, I don't know. I don't think you were married, but like, what was the relationship like? Because it sounds like she got pretty full on, and like, it didn't matter. She was like, you're here. You're going to give me a grandchild regardless.
yeah, and we lived together. We weren't engaged, we weren't married. That, I don't think that was ever on the cards for me. So it was a pretty standard relationship. I don't really want to go into the relationship in specifics with him, but there was nothing to shout home about. There was nothing wrong. He didn't treat me badly or anything like that. We had some fun times, we had some lots of fun times. It was pretty standard for a relationship. And I suppose I can't really remember the time when I said, kids aren't for me. But it was in a conversation. There was no specific sit down, by the way, to tell you this. It just wasn't a factor. And I think at the time we had 2 dogs. We got one as a puppy and one as a rescue. And it was very clear to him and my family that these were my children, and this is where all my maternal instinct was getting showered on, and very, very happy and very content and fulfilled. That's all I felt I needed, I guess.
Yeah. And look, I think sometimes the older generations really struggle with this concept of the fact that we know that we have a choice, because I think what's happened for a lot of them is they didn't realize they had a choice. So they did what they were supposed to do. They left school, they got married, they started pumping out children, they did all that traditional stuff. So part of that tradition is to have then grandchildren. So I think, and some of them maybe can now look back and go, wow, I didn't realize I had a choice to have children. I just did what was expected of me. And some maybe regret that choice, but I think also some now think, well, hang on, I've done the right thing. You have to do the right thing because that's what we're supposed to do. Because it's so ingrained in society, in everything, in the stories we're raised with, in society, in the church, in religion, in the government. Everything is geared towards motherhood for women. And when you go against that, it's this whole that you're disrupting a social construct. They're like, what do you mean no? And what do you mean you've got a choice? Certainly the generation that's coming through behind that know now, and they're very vocal about the fact that, hey, we don't want kids and we're not going to apologize, and we want them to leave the earth in a better place and all these types of things, which is fantastic because they understand that they've got a choice. But I think someone like your mother-in-law, obviously she wanted to have more children and couldn't, but I think there's that whole generation before us that struggle with our choice because we have a choice to start with. And I think that's part of it, because they go, wow, you're so lucky to have this that we never had it. And maybe some of that's a little bit of jealousy that they put onto you as well and go, well, I never had these choices or what you guys have got now. And particularly someone like your mother-in-law who can't have children, she maybe saw that as oh my God, well, you can, so why aren't you? Because that's the ultimate gift. And she's probably struggled to understand the fact that, well, I choose not to for whatever reason,
Yeah, I think it was very clear to me that the thing she wanted the most in the entire world was a grandchild. Like she talked about buying the house next door to us so she could babysit this non-existent grandchild. Like she would have given her right leg for me to have a child. Yeah. And that's where the difficulty was. The thing I wanted the least was a child, and the thing she wanted the most. And I suppose this is where the clash is. She just could not comprehend what sort of a monster, what sort of a woman would not want a baby, a child, you know. And I think it really changed how she looked at me. She didn't see me as a woman. She was horrified. How could I possibly not want a child? It was so weird for her. And then because of I suppose if she'd heard of someone who didn't want children, she might have just thought that's really peculiar, that's not, but the fact it impacted, well, she felt my choices impacted her. And so, yeah, it was,
do you know,
it was a conflict.
Do you know now if she does have a grandchild?
So I know she's got at least one, which is great for her. So that's all I know. I know no other details. I don't need to or want to.
Yeah.
But I hope she's got her peace and she's happy with that.
And you know what? Hopefully she didn't get that grandchild either by badgering and bullying her son's partner to giving her one as well, because, you know, we've seen so many instances of that where someone's just felt so much pressure that, oh my God, it's just easy to do what they want. And that's, as we've spoken about, is wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, I have no idea of the circumstances. I would suggest that that wasn't the case, and I hope that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just guessing that the majority of people want children, so it would have been pretty if his next partner was also as steadfast child-free as me. So
wow. That would have got like a lead.
I hope and like to think it was standard circumstances.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to what we were talking about before in regards to the pressure to have a child and the impact that it has to have a child for someone else when you don't want it. I think there's actually quite a lot of this that goes on in society, you know, all around the world, because, you know, most societies are very traditional, some very pronatalist in their approach. And as we spoke, you know, said, it's like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. You do this, and then you get married and then you have a kid. Like that's supposedly what you're supposed to do. But I think, you know, this pressure to conform and to do what is expected and, you know, is so intense sometimes. And, you know, it can come from partners who don't accept the decision. You know, the thing is, well, you've got to have that conversation as part of that relationship. I lost track of the amount of people I've spoken to who are married and then went, oh no, we never spoke about if we wanted to have kids. And you went, how do you not have that conversation? One goes yes and one goes no, and then you're like, oh, but they'll change their mind. No, they won't. It just it's just too hard. So I think it's really important, firstly, be on the same page. But I think certainly having a child for someone else is definitely not a reason to have a child, because one, you end up resenting that person. You know, you could even end up resenting the child. You're bringing a child into the world that you don't actually want, even though you might have it and you might fall in love with it and become more comfortable with it or whatever. But it's putting added pressure on you, your mental state. It's putting added pressure on relationships. You know, if the child isn't wanted at all, it's putting added pressure on, you know, society or the government to actually have to pay for it and raise it and all these types of things. So I don't think anyone seems to, like those parents in particular that are putting that pressure on, don't see that side of it. They just go, well, I've got what I want. That's all I care about. They don't see, well, if this person had a child when they don't want one, what does that mean for them? What does that mean for their life? Like, and how massive an impact is that? Because a child's for life. We know that. So I think it would be great if we had more awareness around that conversation and more conversations like that to everyone to be having with parents in that generation, saying, hang on a minute, that's not right for you to put pressure on your children to do something that may be not right for them when you yourself had a choice to do what was right for you. And I think we need more conversation and dialogue around that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I've kind of got a theory, and I've seen it on other platforms at times. But so I think some relationships, the the male might have compromised. The male might be too keen on having kids, but I think it's a lot easier for a male to compromise and say, well, I'm not actually too keen. The female might say, I'm desperate for kids, I'll do all the work, you know. So it impacts
anyway,
the
pretty
female
much.
physically, the female, obviously the pregnancy and the birth. Yeah, exactly. And actually a male can weigh, please, there's a lot of steadfast child-free men, there's a lot of men who have been through a lot of difficulty here. I'm really not being sexist, but I feel like a man can compromise more. If my partner was desperate for kids, I just couldn't do it. It would not work. I think a man's life remains relatively stable after a child comes along. Their work remains relatively stable. Their social circle remains stable. Their friendships don't change. Some of my friendships change, some don't. You know, some I can't see friends without the child being in tow. That's never the same for my partner. The children don't necessarily feature in his friendships, and I think it can sometimes, if the man's not against, but I just don't think it could work if the female's not vehemently against, because the trauma involved and the mental health involved and the sacrifices is just too big. So there's sometimes room for compromise if they communicate. They still have to communicate, have to discuss what's expected. It's not simply a case of, because you hear of the complete joint parenting, but I still hear stories in a comical way that, you know, dad's won the dad of the year because he managed to ballet. The mum still booked the ballet, arranged the payments, packed, done the ballet duty. So, and I need to stress again, I'm really not trying to be sexist here. It's a stereotype, and I know that's not the same in all families. But I would agree, it's not something you can compromise on. You need.
It's a true
stereotype. And there's some
this is what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So you're absolutely right. Conversations need to be had. We need to be open. And yeah, I'm the same as you. I know friends who got married and they never had this discussion. And that's insane. I think sometimes people just assume that's what they'll do. So
yeah,
anyway, it's
there's a lot of assumptions there. There's a lot of assumptions between partners, between parents and children. I had that conversation I got married young. I was with my partner when I was 19, and I was married when I was 23. And I said to him, I'm not having a child for you, your parents, your family, anybody, because I know that they wanted, they've got other grandkids, which takes the pressure off. But I'm like, I'm not doing it for anybody. So, you know, I'm not going to tolerate, and I'm the sort of person that wouldn't tolerate that either. And they know that I wouldn't tolerate that sort of pressure or that conversation. Like, I would have just told them in no uncertain terms to F word off. But you know, not everyone's, you know, like that either. And again, you try and be respectful and you try and do it the nice way, but it gets to a point where you're just like, you know, enough's enough. But you know, not everyone can do that as well. Like I know of women who just, you know, went, you know, I'm just going to do what everyone wants me to do and so forth. And I just think that is so sad and unfair that they've done that. But in saying that, they made that choice to do that as well. So it's like, well, you made the choice. You didn't have to. You did actually have a choice, but you didn't want it. You want it. I think they sometimes see it as an easier way out. It's just easier. I just keep everyone else happy. It doesn't matter that I'm not happy. As long as everyone, you know what I mean? And this is where, like, we need to change this dialogue, and women need to be supportive of other women. Parents need to start supporting their children's choices. And I was lucky. My parents always did. And I know a lot of child-free people have got supportive parents. I'm not saying that they don't. But I think there needs to be a lot more conversation in society about this in general. And then hopefully, you know, we can educate people like your mother-in-law and go, well, you know, we understand that that's what you want, but it's not your life. This is someone else's life. This is your child and your, you know, your potential daughter-in-law, or, you know, however you want to, you know, position it. That it's not their life and not their choice to make. and yeah, it's you know, I know it's one that many women in particular, and I know men go through it as well, but the burden typically does rest on the women because they're the ones typically having the children. So yeah, exactly what you said before. It may be stereotyping, but that's what happens in society. You know, men's relationships often don't change. Their work often doesn't change. They don't have to have, you know, a year off work or whatever. You know, it's the women that, regardless if you're joint parenting, still take on the majority of the burden. Doesn't matter how much joint parenting you supposedly do. They're the ones that are doing all that. So I don't know. I think you know, what advice do you have for people who have got mother-in-laws or parents pressuring them after being what you've been through? What advice would you give those people?
So definitely stay yourself, but be assertive. I think that experience taught me so much. Yes, I was younger. I am actually a very assertive person, despite the fact that I was in that situation. I maybe wasn't as assertive as I would have liked to have been, but be assertive, be straight to the point. Don't say maybe, if, when, don't give false hope. Just say exactly what you want or don't want, and make no apology for it. You don't need a reason to not want children. If they ask you why, or try to persuade you, or try to bribe you, or say they'll pay for XYZ, all of that is irrelevant. It's about what you want, and don't be persuaded otherwise. Yeah. And also, don't be afraid if they're not listening to you or respecting you, cutting them out. Don't be afraid to say, and this is what I should have done, is just said to my partner, I'm not seeing your mum again, right? That's it. The line's now drawn. I've made my boundaries really clear. I could not have expressed to her any clearer, not on the cards, yet she saying things, and I wish I'd just cut her off until she'd either apologized or the subject, and just said, right, I'm not spending any time with you. You've not heard me. You've not listened to what I'm saying. And don't be afraid to do that, because I think maybe I didn't do it because I thought, oh, but what about my partner? If he's got an issue with it, it should be over anyway. So yeah. Be strong and know that, you know, you can only control yourself. You can't control other people's emotions. So you've got to put yourself first.
I think that's fantastic advice. I love your point around false hope and not giving them, if you say if or maybe, that's actually giving them hope that, oh, maybe this could happen. And boundaries for sure. Like, I think, as you said, like this is what's okay, this is not what's okay. And then if you need to cut them off, because it's not, and you should have your partner supporting that as well. Like, you're supposed to be a united team with this thing. Yeah. So you don't have your partner support. So then you have to question, well, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be on my side, aren't you? You know, I think that's awesome advice.
Yeah. Well, I hope it helps someone.
I think for sure that would help, definitely help someone. I think, you know, people hearing this conversation and knowing that, you know, you've had that, you've come through it, you know. Can I ask, are you in a relationship with anyone else now?
Yeah, I've been with my fiance for 3 years, just over 3 years, and it's a very good relationship, very open. We communicate incredibly well, and yeah, could not be in a better place. So
is there a mother-in-law in the picture?
Yes, and she is a dream. She is adorable, and I've gone from one extreme to the other. She's very kind, very understanding. It's a non-issue. It's just not even. It's invisible, but it's not a kind of the elephant in the room either. It's just a non-issue.
That's fantastic. So, I think you probably deserve that after what you went through. Yeah. So no, it's great. It's great. And you know, my partner's been brilliant as well. We're both getting on in years, and I suppose this is a conversation that I think it's easier to bring up quite soon if you start seeing someone when you're a little bit older in life, because it's something that's maybe quite pressing. So we had meditations, and I think initially he was quite surprised, simply because, again, his background, it's just what you did.
And whilst he wasn't desperate to be a father, I think he just thought that at some point he would be. So we've had so many conversations. I think I've bored him to death, and I've talked him, oh, silly. But I think that the way he sees himself is that he's not, he probably sees himself as childless by circumstance, but he loves me, and he has no overbearing desire to have children. But if I wanted them, he would have had them.
Yeah.
So he's not pining after something. He owns up. He says that if he was with someone else, which he wouldn't want to be, and they wanted kids, and yeah, it would be, though, should he be able to. So whilst he's not feeling he's missing out on anything, and he's perfectly happy with because it has to be a mutual decision, he is very, very supportive, and every which way aspect. And we admit that it's hard work. Neither of us want the hard work of being a parent.
Yeah. And look, there's no reason why he can't, or either of you can't have children in your life anyway. Like, he can mentor young boys, he can teach them, he can, he can be with nieces and nephews and do things with them. Like, he can still have children in his life. It's just in a different way to having one full time as well. I think people forget that. They think it has to be all or nothing. It's like, well, no, I've got a friend who loves kids. She goes, I love them. I love spending time with them, and she loves spending time with her friends' kids. She goes, I just don't want one full time for me. So people think, oh, because you're child free, you must hate children, and not all of us hate them. There's times where I hate them, but I love spending time with my nieces and nephews and having that. You know what I mean? So there's no reason why you both, or even him, if he wants more of that in his life, can't have that. So he still gets that sort of kid fix, but still has this, this great child-free life.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. We've got nieces and nephews. We've got some lovely children in our lives. And again, like, I'm totally honest. I don't class myself as a kid lover. I don't class myself as a kid hater at all. I've got some great relationships. It's like I'm an absolute dog obsessed. But there's some dogs I don't really care for,
Yeah.
So, we've got some wonderful relationships there. If anything, it's really funny because I'm probably the one that interacts with friends' kids more. And so he kind of, in the early days, was like, oh, but you're so good with kids. But I make an effort. If my friends have kids or family have kids, I will make an effort with them. I maybe try and make an effort more than most people would, because I'm trying to prove I'm not a monster or a child hater. And that's something I maybe need to work on a bit, because I maybe put too much energy there to gain acceptance, when I don't need to prove anything to anyone. No. It's perfectly acceptable to not want to hold a baby or not go goo goo gaga over a baby.
And I refuse to hold anyone's baby. I don't care who they are. I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm not holding it. And they're like, it. And I'm like, I don't want anything to do with it until it can talk. Like, then I might interact with it. I'm not a baby person by any means.
No,
look,
I'm not either.
Oh, and exactly, you shouldn't have to apologize for it, and you don't have to be either. Like, it's just like, well, I'm just not. It's as simple as that. I'm like you. I love dogs. I'm surrounded by dogs at the moment. Like, I love them. They're my babies. And I shouldn't have to apologize or explain that to anybody either. That's just my choice. And I think this is the thing about, because you don't want something, you're expected to explain it. And it's just like, well, why do I have to? You haven't explained your choice to have children. Why do I have to explain my choice not to?
Yeah, this is something that's relatively new to me, to openly admit that I'm not that keen on babies. Because before, I would never really express it either way. If someone brought a baby to the workplace and everyone crowded around them, I'd probably still loiter there as well. Because I suppose if you admit you don't really care for babies, I'm a monster. But actually, again, trying to kind of be honest and be authentic and be true. I mean, anything bad should happen to them. I've actually worked to protect children in previous jobs, but I'm just not drawn to them and be a bad person. I think it's perfectly okay to admit out loud, I'm not a baby person.
Yep.
And I know some people will be horrified by that, but that is my truth. And I'm actually a really nice person, but just don't give me a baby.
I don't see it as being any different than someone saying, well, I don't like dogs and I don't want to be around your dog or play with your dog. Well, that's fine. I'm not going to force it on you, and I'm not going to ask you to explain why. That's just something that you don't like. It should be the same thing with us with babies or children. It's like, well, I don't want to be around your baby and I don't want to hold your baby. It's no different to having a dog or a cat or anything else. We go, I don't want to interact with that. It shouldn't require an explanation. You're not a monster. You know, I don't say to someone, oh, you're such a monster because you won't pat my dog. Like, it's just ridiculous. So we should never have to explain that or apologize for it or our choices. And it's as simple as that.
I know. And this, I think, is really nice. Chatting with child-free people, and we all have different ideas as well. You know, this is the thing. It's not just a one road and everyone's ideas are the same. Listening to things, listening to podcasts, reading various books, getting all the different ideas and recognizing that actually it's okay.
Yeah.
How I live okay. It can be great, and you don't need to feel guilty. So it's all very, very positive. And I think the more we have the conversation, and the more people come into the conversation and recognize their choice, I just think it's only going to be a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we can have this conversation, I'm sure, for many hours, but we both have things that we need to go and do. Thank you so much, Ali, for writing the article, being brave, sharing your story, talking to me today, and being open and honest about your situation, and sharing things that I think will definitely help women and men who have been, you know, are maybe going through this themselves or might go through it at some point, because I think the more that other people see that, hey, other people have been through it, you can survive. This is some tips on how to do that. It's okay, you're not alone, is really important. So thank you so much for being part of the conversation and for being part of hopefully making some change in the dialogue we see in society.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be really good. And it's been really good to chat to you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali.